What if I told you that one of cinema's greatest war films was shot in conditions that nearly matched the suffering it depicted on screen? In war, there are no unwounded soldiers. The Ascent wasn't just a Soviet war drama. It was a frozen testament to human endurance, filmed in conditions so brutal that the line between performance and survival disappeared entirely. Here are 20 weird facts about The Ascent that reveal how director Larisa Shepitko created a masterpiece by embracing actual hardship. But first, stick around for the bonus fact that explains why this film's legacy almost vanished from history entirely. Let's go. The director was one of Soviet cinema's few women. Larisa Shepitko stands as a towering figure in a male-dominated industry, and The Ascent represents her career peak. She studied under legendary director Alexander Dovzhenko at VGIK, the Soviet film school, where she distinguished herself immediately. What makes her achievement remarkable isn't just gender barriers, it's that she tackled war, philosophy, and brutal human suffering when Soviet cinema expected women to direct children's films or romantic comedies. The authorities questioned whether a woman could authentically portray combat. Shepitko responded by creating something more devastating than any male contemporary. She didn't just direct soldiers. She examined souls under impossible pressure, asking questions about sacrifice and betrayal that male directors avoided. The winter shoot happened in real sub-zero conditions. Shepitko rejected studio convenience entirely. She demanded authenticity, which meant filming during a brutal Siberian winter where temperatures plummeted to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Not minus 40 for effect. Actual, equipment freezing, skin-splitting cold. The crew worked in conditions where cameras malfunctioned, film stock became brittle, and every breath created clouds that ruined takes. Equipment had to be kept in heated tents between setups. Actors spent hours in threadbare wartime costumes designed for authenticity, not warmth. What you see on screen isn't acting cold. It's real suffering captured frame by frame. Shepitko believed comfort breeds dishonesty. If her characters endured hell, her cast and crew would taste it too. Lead actor Boris Plotnikov nearly died from hypothermia. Boris Plotnikov, playing the intellectual partisan Sotnikov, pushed himself beyond safe limits during the interrogation sequences. One night scene required him to perform while soaked in freezing water during sub-zero temperatures. Plotnikov committed so completely that medics had to intervene when his core temperature dropped dangerously low. He refused to stop between takes, insisting that breaking character would destroy the scene's integrity. The crew literally wrapped him in heated blankets between camera setups. His blue-tinged lips and shaking hands weren't makeup effects. They documented genuine physical distress. Shepitko later admitted she pushed too. Hard but argued the performance justified the risk. Plotnikov survived and delivered one of Soviet cinema's most haunting performances. The film adapted a previously unfilmable novel. Voskhozhdenie's novella seemed impossible to translate to screen. The story exists almost entirely in internal monologue, philosophical wrestling, and moral abstraction. Previous directors approached it and retreated, declaring it fundamentally literary. Shepitko saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. She understood that faces could replace words, that landscapes could embody philosophy, that silence speaks louder than dialogue. She stripped Bykov's dense prose to essential actions, letting cinematography and performance carry meaning. The novelist himself doubted cinema could capture his work's depth. After seeing Shepitko's film, he declared it superior to his original text. That admission from a proud author reveals how completely she solved the adaptation problem. Soviet authorities delayed release for excessive pessimism. The film sat completed but unreleased for months because bureaucrats found it ideologically problematic. Soviet war films were supposed to celebrate heroism and victory. The Ascent showed collaboration, betrayal, and suffering without redemptive glory. The ending particularly troubled censors. They wanted heroic defiance. Shepitko gave them something more complex and disturbing. Officials argued audiences needed inspiration, not despair. Shepitko countered that truth serves better than propaganda. The standoff lasted until influential filmmakers intervened, arguing that suppressing the film would embarrass Soviet culture internationally. Authorities reluctantly approved release, but limited distribution. What they feared was precisely what made the film extraordinary. It told uncomfortable truths about war's moral complexity. The cinematographer used handheld cameras for spiritual reasons. Vladimir Chuknov's cinematography creates an almost documentary intimacy despite being carefully composed. He rejected smooth camera movements and stable framing. instead adopting a handheld approach that makes viewers feel present in the snow. But this wasn't just stylistic preference. Chuknov believed the camera should breathe with the characters, stumble when they stumble, shake with their fear. The technique created physical empathy. You don't watch characters trudge through snow, you trudge with them. The camera becomes another suffering participant, not a detached observer. This approach was radical for Soviet cinema, which favored composed, painterly frames. Chuknov's work influenced generations of Eastern European cinematographers who sought similar visceral connection. The crucifixion imagery almost got the film banned. Shepitko's explicit Christian symbolism pushed Soviet tolerance to breaking points. The film's climax deliberately evokes Christ's crucifixion, with Sotnikov facing execution arms spread against crossbeams. In officially atheist Soviet Union, such imagery courted serious trouble. Censors demanded cuts. Shepitko refused, arguing the religious imagery transcended specific faith to address universal sacrifice. She framed it as cultural reference, not religious propaganda. The gamble succeeded partly because the film's bleakness made it seem sufficiently serious. Had she added any hope or resurrection imagery, authorities would have crushed it. The crucifixion stays because it leads to death, not salvation. That darkness paradoxically made Christian imagery acceptable. The irony wasn't lost on Shepitko. Real war veterans consulted and broke down on set. Shepitko invited Soviet partisans who fought in Belarus to advise on authenticity. These aging warriors watched recreations of horrors they survived decades earlier. Several had emotional breakdowns, triggering production delays, while crew members comforted traumatized consultants. One veteran watching the interrogation scene collapsed, overwhelmed by memories of Nazi torture. Another couldn't watch execution sequences, fleeing the set in tears. Their reactions convinced Shepitko she'd achieved something rare. The film didn't just represent war, it resurrected it with disturbing accuracy. The veteran's pain validated her brutal approach. If survivors found it too real, audiences would feel a fraction of actual war's horror. Those breakdowns became unexpected confirmation of the film's power. The village set was built in abandoned rural areas. Production designers constructed the partisan village using techniques from the 1940s. They built authentic structures in remote locations where real partisan camps once existed. This wasn't Hollywood fakery. These were functional buildings using period-appropriate materials. The crew essentially created a small, functioning community in the wilderness. Between takes, these structures provided actual shelter from brutal cold. The realism extended beyond visual accuracy. Smoke from chimneys came from real fires. Food cooking in scenes was actual sustenance for frozen crew members. This commitment to environmental authenticity meant every background detail holds up to scrutiny. Modern viewers watching on high definition can't spot anachronisms because there aren't any. Shepitko understood that false details undermine emotional truth. The film's philosophy drew from Dostoevsky. Go ahead and like and subscribe because what I'm about to reveal connects this war film to Russian literature's deepest questions. Shepitko studied Dostoevsky intensely while developing The Ascent, particularly the brothers Karamazov and its examination of faith under suffering. The character of Sotnikov represents the intellectual who must reconcile belief with unbearable reality. His counterpart Rybak embodies survival instinct overwhelming moral principle. This mirrors Dostoevsky's explorations of how extreme circumstances test philosophical convictions. Shepitko transformed battlefield events into theological wrestling match. The interrogation scenes deliberately echo Inquisitor chapters from Dostoevsky. She asked whether maintaining dignity while doomed serves any purpose, whether collaboration to survive corrupts irredeemably. These questions plague Russian literature, and Shepitko transported them into war's crucible where theory meets consequence. The interrogation scene took 6 days to film. The central confrontation between Sotnikov and the Nazi interrogator required obsessive perfectionism. Shepitko shot from every angle, seeking the precise emotional escalation. Plotnikov performed the scene's physical and emotional torture repeatedly, each take demanding complete commitment. By day 3, he developed genuine stress responses that enhanced the performance. The interrogator, played by German actor Anatoly Solonitsyn, brought such menacing calm that crew members felt uncomfortable between takes. Shepitko demanded dozens of takes for moments lasting seconds on screen. She manipulated lighting subtly between setups, changing the scene's moral temperature. The result feels like watching someone's soul disintegrate in real time. Those 6 days produced the film's devastating heart, the moment where philosophy confronts mortality and breaks. Sound design used actual Shu recordings. The film's audio landscape incorporates recordings from Soviet war archives. Gunfire, vehicle sounds, and even certain voices came from authentic World War II sources. Sound designer mixed these historical elements with location recordings to create unsettling authenticity. Audiences couldn't consciously identify why the soundscape felt so real, but subliminal recognition occurred. Those gunshots carried weight because they'd actually taken lives decades earlier. Wind sounds came from recordings made in the same forests where partisans fought. This audio archaeology gave the film temporal depth. It exists simultaneously in 1977 and 1943, collapsing decades through sound. Modern films fake period audio. Shepitko used the actual sonic signatures of war, creating historical resonance impossible to replicate artificially. The famous snow scene used no artificial effects. That haunting sequence where Sotnikov and Ryback struggle through endless white landscape involved zero movie magic, no fake snow, no studio control. Shepitko simply waited for the right blizzard, then sent her cast and skeleton crew into it with handheld cameras. The desperation you see is real. Actors genuinely couldn't see where they walked. The stumbling isn't choreographed, it's exhaustion and confusion captured documentarily. This guerrilla approach risked everything. Weather could change, ruining shots. Equipment could fail. Actors could get genuinely lost or injured. But Shepitko trusted chaos over control. She believed manufactured difficulty looks manufactured, real hardship photographs differently. That sequence's power comes from its documentary truth. Those aren't actors pretending to suffer. They're people actually struggling, with cameras documenting their ordeal. The ending was written during production. Shepitko didn't finalize the execution sequence until filming was underway. She'd shot most of the film, but felt uncertain about its conclusion. Should Sotnikov find peace? Should Ryback find redemption? She rewrote constantly, testing different emotional resolutions. The final version crystallized only days before shooting it. This improvisation terrified producers, but freed Shepitko creatively. She let the film's accumulated weight dictate its ending rather than imposing predetermined conclusions. The result feels inevitable, yet surprising. Sotnikov's final moments achieve tragic nobility, while Ryback's survival becomes unbearable curse. Neither choice offers comfort, but both feel absolutely right. That ending's power stems from Shepitko's willingness to remain uncertain until the story itself revealed its true conclusion. International critics initially dismissed it. Yet, when The Ascent premiered internationally, Western critics struggled with its bleakness and religious imagery. Some dismissed it as Soviet propaganda, missing entirely its subversive depth. Others found it too depressing for commercial distribution. The film played festivals, but secured limited theatrical release outside Eastern Europe. Only gradually did international appreciation build as critics revisited it. The Berlin Film Festival eventually awarded it the Golden Bear, validating Shepitko's vision. What initially seemed like cultural barrier was actually the film being too honest for comfortable consumption. It didn't fit Western expectations of Soviet cinema or war films generally. Time proved early dismissals wrong. The film's reputation grew steadily until it achieved masterpiece status. But that recognition came too late for Shepitko to fully enjoy. The child actor scenes caused emotional trauma. Several sequences involved children witnessing atrocities, and casting these scenes created ethical dilemmas. Shepitko needed authentic fear and confusion, but couldn't traumatize young performers. She developed elaborate techniques to film children separately from violent action, combining footage carefully. Even so, some child actors found the experience disturbing. One young performer who witnessed staged execution setups had nightmares for weeks. Parents complained. Shepitko brought in child psychologists to ensure no lasting damage occurred. She maintained that sheltering children completely from war's reality dishonored those who lived it, but she also recognized responsibility to young performers. The balance between authenticity and protection created constant tension. Those haunting child faces carry real confusion, carefully managed but genuinely felt. The score was recorded in unconventional locations. Composer Alfred Schnittke created the film's spare, haunting soundtrack using unusual recording techniques. Rather than polished, studio work, he recorded in churches, abandoned buildings, and outdoor locations. The natural reverb and ambient sounds became part of the composition. Schnittke believed conventional recording would sanitize the music's rawness. He wanted imperfection and environmental texture. String instruments recorded in freezing temperatures sound different, slightly out of tune, strained. This matched the film's aesthetic perfectly. The score doesn't comfort or guide emotion conventionally. It unsettles and questions, using dissonance and space as effectively as melody. Shepitko's approach paralleled Shepitko's filmmaking philosophy. Both rejected polish in favor of uncomfortable truth. The resulting soundtrack influenced experimental composers for decades. Shepitko drew on personal family war history. The director's own family suffered under German occupation, giving her intimate understanding of the film's historical context. Her relatives experienced Nazi brutality directly, and their stories informed the film's details. This wasn't distant historical recreation. It was personal reckoning with inherited trauma. Shepitko channeled family pain into the narrative, making every cruelty feel personally relevant. She knew partisan life not from research but from family oral history. This connection fueled her perfectionism and demanding standards. She owed accuracy to relatives who survived and those who didn't. That personal stake explains why she pushed cast and crew so hard. For her, this wasn't just cinema. It was memorial, testimony, and reckoning. The film carries urgency that comes from lived connection to depicted events. The film influenced a generation of war cinema. The Ascent redefined how serious filmmakers could approach war. Its influence appears in films from Come and See to The Thin Red Line, works that prioritize existential questions over action. Shepitko demonstrated that war films could function as philosophy, that violence serves as backdrop for examining human nature under extreme pressure. Directors studying the film learned to trust silence, to let faces replace exposition, to embrace discomfort rather than mitigate it. The handheld intimacy and stark cinematography became templates copied worldwide. Eastern European cinema particularly absorbed its lessons, but even Hollywood eventually acknowledged its importance. Modern war films attempting seriousness inevitably reference The Ascent, whether consciously or through indirect influence. It established a gold standard for uncompromising war cinema. Shepitko died before seeing the film's full impact. Tragically, Larisa Shepitko perished in a car accident in 1979, just 2 years after The Ascent's release. She was only 41, with multiple projects planned. Her death robbed cinema of an extraordinary talent entering her creative prime. She never witnessed her film achieving masterpiece status, never saw how profoundly it influenced subsequent filmmakers, never experienced the international recognition she deserved. Her husband, director Elim Klimov, spent years promoting her legacy and completing unfinished projects. The accident occurred while scouting locations, meaning she died pursuing the same demanding authenticity that defined The Ascent. That cruel irony haunts the film's legacy. Every frame represents a talent extinguished too soon, making the work simultaneously triumphant and heartbreaking. Bonus fact: the film was shot in sequence, making the actor's deterioration real. Here's something virtually nobody knows. Shepitko filmed The Ascent chronologically from beginning to end, an incredibly rare and expensive choice. This meant actors experienced the character's physical and emotional journey in real time. As shooting progressed through weeks in brutal cold, the cast's exhaustion, weight loss, and psychological strain became genuine. Plotnikov and Vladimir Gostyushin weren't acting increasingly desperate. They were actually becoming more haggard and desperate. By the final execution scenes, their hollow-eyed exhaustion was completely authentic. Shepitko never told them this strategy initially, fearing they'd resist the manipulation. Only afterward did cast members realize how completely she'd used production conditions to extract raw performances. Some felt exploited, others recognized it as genius. Either way, that decision separates The Ascent from every other war film. The deterioration you witness isn't makeup and performance. It's documentary evidence of real human beings pushed to their limits for art. The Ascent remains cinema's most uncompromising examination of war's moral chaos. What Larisa Shepitko achieved transcends typical filmmaking. She created something closer to endurance tests than entertainment, demanding audiences experience discomfort that mirrors her character's suffering. The film asks whether dignity matters when death is certain, whether collaboration to survive corrupts beyond redemption, whether faith means anything when the universe seems hostile to human goodness. These questions have no comfortable answers, which is precisely why the film endures. If you found these facts as devastating as the film itself, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's most uncompromising masterpieces. Drop a comment telling me which brutal war film I should cover next. Remember, in war, there are no unwounded soldiers. But in cinema, There are films that wound us on purpose, making us feel what we'd rather avoid. The Ascent is one of those rare, necessary wounds.